We'll examine the intricately cut stone blocks of Tiwanaku tonight, as well as the interlocking joints of Puma Punku, which baffle contemporary engineers. These websites offer information that has been lost to time, technologies, or methods that we are still unable to duplicate. What can we learn about the genius of ancient America from these stones? What if our estimate of the time that humans arrived in the Americas was incorrect? A straightforward account of migration across the Bering Land Bridge some 13,000 years ago was presented in the textbooks that many of us studied. According to this story, civilization in the Western Hemisphere emerged much later than in other regions of the world, indicating a relatively recent human presence there. However, new data keeps raising serious questions about this accepted chronology. Before we start our journey tonight, please get comfortable, close your eyes, and let your mind wander. If you like these calming stories from the past, please take a moment to subscribe to Dreamtime History for Sleep and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss a new story, and we can make a peaceful place for you to sleep at night. Think about the prehistoric footprints that have been conserved in New Mexico's White Sands National Park. These aren't merely arbitrary traces in the ground. Rather, they show the actual footsteps of people traversing muddy terrain. These prints are roughly 23,000 years old, according to scientific analysis. According to the conventional model, humans could have existed 10,000 years earlier. Stone tools discovered at archaeological sites further south in Brazil suggest that human activity dates back even further, possibly 32,000 years. These are not isolated occurrences. Rather, they are a component of an expanding body of evidence. The clock is continuously pushed back by radiocarbon dating of worked stone artifacts, animal bones with cut marks, and ancient campfire remains. Every new finding marks a new chapter in a timeline that goes far further back in time than was previously thought. This goes beyond simply changing the dates by a few centuries, and the ramifications are profound. The possibility that humans have been in the Americas for twice as long as traditional history suggests is what we are examining. These discoveries have occasionally been disregarded by mainstream archaeology as tainted samples or incorrectly interpreted natural formations. However, it is becoming more and more challenging to uphold this position as evidence from numerous independent sites accumulates. Instead, a picture of several waves of migration that may have taken different routes beyond the Bering Land Bridge comes into view. Some might have arrived during different climatic conditions when passages were easier to reach, while others might have used watercraft to travel along coastlines. According to this updated timeline, people have been reshaping the American continents for a lot longer than we previously thought. Complex societies were already emerging in Europe, which was still in the midst of its Stone Age. They were making observations about their surroundings, creating new technologies, and establishing the groundwork for the amazing civilizations that would come after. The history of humanity in the Americas is not less extensive than that of the Old World. Rather, it is merely different, and in some places, it may even be older than we previously thought. Let's now look at the first major city to emerge from this prehistoric chronology. Imagine a city thriving in Peru's Soup Valley at a time when Egypt's Great Pyramids were only outlines in the sand. Caral's depiction of urban planning rewrites our perception of early American civilization. This complex of pyramids, plazas, and residential areas shows that advanced societies were emerging here at the same time as those in Egypt and Mesopotamia, but on a totally different technological trajectory. Caral is unique, not only because of its age, but also because of the way it was constructed. They built enormous pyramidal structures that still dominate the landscape, despite lacking writing systems, metal tools, and even the wheel. They made use of woven reed bags packed with debris, carefully chosen stones from riverbeds, and an innate grasp of structural engineering. In this seismically active area, their construction techniques included elements that made the buildings exceptionally earthquake-resistant, which is essential. The use of flexible building materials permitted movement without collapsing, and the walls tapered upward to create sturdy foundations that could endure tremors. Knowledge that is equally sophisticated is revealed in the ceremonial spaces. Whispers from the center could be clearly heard at the periphery of circular sunken plazas, which were designed with precise acoustic properties, implying rituals involving coordinated musical performances. Instruments made from the bones of pelicans and condors, shell trumpets that could produce deep, resonant tones, have been discovered by archaeologists. These were intricately designed musical instruments that would have taken skill to make and play, not simple noisemakers. Caral was linked to far-off places through trade networks, which brought knowledge from all over the Andes, seeds and plants from the highlands, and spondylus shells from the coast. They used irrigation systems that made the most of the water from the nearby Soup River to grow cotton, squash, beans, and other crops. Their agricultural methods allowed them to sustain a sizable population without consuming too much land, demonstrating their knowledge of crop rotation and soil management. The archaeological record paints a picture of a well-organized, tranquil society. There are no fortifications, no evidence of warfare, no depictions of conquest. Rather, we discover evidence of sustainable living, ritual celebration, and community cooperation. They established cultural traditions that valued both practical knowledge and spiritual expression, prudently managed resources, and constructed buildings that would last for generations. This civilization serves as an example of how sophistication does not always follow the expected technological trajectory. Instead of using metalworking or mechanical inventions, they accomplished amazing feats through social organization, environmental awareness, and teamwork. Their legacy serves as a reminder that collaboration and adaptation, rather than dominance and conquest, can lead to the flourishing of civilization. We'll now see how they moved enormous stones without the aid of contemporary technology. How did prehistoric builders transport 50-ton stones over 80 kilometers of challenging terrain? Massive basalt-carved stone heads from the Olmec civilization are a testament to human ingenuity and hard work. Without wheels, draft animals, or any other equipment we might consider necessary for such heavy lifting, they managed to accomplish this. The stone itself was quarried using stone tools and unwavering perseverance on the Tuxtla Mountain slopes. After that, the actual labor started moving these enormous blocks to all places of worship like San Lorenzo and La Venta. Several approaches have been put forth by researchers based on experimental archaeology and tangible evidence. Teams of laborers could have used ropes made from local fibers to pull log rollers made from robust tropical hardwoods underneath the stones. To lessen friction, the path would have been meticulously prepared, smoothed, and occasionally even paved with logs. They may have used barges or rafts for coastal transportation or river crossings, taking advantage of the buoyancy of water to move weights that would not be feasible on land. According to some accounts, they exploited seasonal floods and floating stones on makeshift waterways. These operations require coordination, which is indicative of highly developed social organization. Hundreds of people would need to coordinate their efforts to move a 50-ton stone, with leaders leading the charge and experts handling the technical difficulties. Since visual cues would be challenging to convey over large work crews, they required clear communication systems, most likely using audible signals. A society that could sustain large labor forces through efficient agriculture and resource management would be indicated by the workers' need for proper nutrition and rest. In various eras and cultures, similar transportation achievements can be found throughout the Americas. The Incas transported andesite across mountain ranges. The Maya moved blocks of limestone for their temples, and other cultures moved stone and earth for platforms and mounds. Although the methods differ depending on the area and the materials at hand, the fundamental ideas of persistence, coordination, and leverage never changed. According to some theories, they may have reduced friction by using vibration or resonant frequency. But these theories are still theoretical in the absence of more solid data. It becomes evident that these were well thought out engineering projects rather than haphazard brute force attacks. They were aware of the difficulties presented by their terrain, the qualities of their materials, and the skills of their personnel. The investment in manpower shows that societies, whether religious, political, or social, have a strong incentive to carry out such large-scale projects. These were displays of organizational ability and cultural values rather than desperate actions. The accomplishments demonstrate a useful understanding of physics that we occasionally undervalue. They were adept at controlling large moving objects, distributing weight, and lowering friction. Observation, experimentation, and accumulated experience led to the development of this applied science. Although the techniques rollers, ropes, ramps may appear straightforward, their effective application on this scale required a profound understanding. After they arrived at their destinations, think of how precisely they shaped these enormous stones. Even today's engineers find it difficult to solve the puzzle of the stonework at Tiwanaku. Andesite blocks are assembled at Puma Punku with joints so accurate they look machined. The surfaces exhibit flawless flatness, and the angles are precisely cut, which defies the technology of the Stone Age. These are precise fits that have withstood centuries of seismic activity in this geologically active area, not merely rough estimates. Every block exhibits a deep comprehension of materials and geometry. Some have intricate interlocking patterns that, even with powered tools, would be difficult for contemporary stonemasons to master. The accuracy also applies to boreholes that are precisely aligned and have a constant diameter when drilled through solid stone. There are no indications of the slow wear that we might anticipate from crude tools. The corners are precise and the edges are still sharp. This implies methods that go beyond basic stone pecking and grinding. The geometric designs etched into some of the blocks become especially fascinating. They exhibit mathematically regular repeating motifs that point to measurement systems and layout strategies that we haven't yet fully figured out. In addition to being purely ornamental, the patterns seem to have structural or assembly functions, directing how the blocks fit together while being built. The uniformity among several blocks suggests standardized procedures as opposed to handiwork. Seismic forces are obviously taken into account in the construction. The precise fits prevent excessive shifting, and the interlocking joints permit slight movement during earthquakes without collapsing. This indicates a thorough understanding of environmental issues as well as materials. They created structures that could endure tremors and the test of time by understanding how stone behaves under stress. Comparable precision has mostly eluded modern attempts to duplicate these methods with only period-appropriate instruments. Modern stonemasons find it difficult to match the accuracy, even with sophisticated measuring tools. This implies either techniques that involved processes we have unthought of, or specialized tools that haven't been identified or preserved. According to some researchers, they may have employed specialized grinding techniques or abrasive compounds that left no visible residue. Within their society, the precision work suggests a specialized division of labor. These methods would have been created by master craftsmen, learned by apprentices through years of training, and perhaps even theoretically passed down through the generations. This was not a casual construction project. Rather, it was a highly skilled endeavor requiring the highest level of manual dexterity, spatial reasoning, and mathematical comprehension. In contrast to traditional narratives about ancient American civilizations, a picture of technological sophistication is revealed. They took a different approach than old-world cultures to solving engineering problems. Their knowledge seems to be both theoretical and practical, combining a thorough comprehension of materials and forces with practical expertise. Even by contemporary standards, the techniques represent a pinnacle of stoneworking achievement. This intricate stonework relates to more general knowledge patterns found in ancient American cultures. We observe comparable attention to precise measurement and meticulous craftsmanship from the Olmec to the Inca. Although the techniques may have differed by time and place, the fundamental dedication to accuracy has remained constant. Accuracy was important to them for longevity and structural integrity as well as aesthetics. Let's now examine how urban planning incorporated this knowledge. The ruins of El Mirador, located deep within the Guatemalan jungle, show a city larger than the later Maya centers you may be more familiar with. This was a vast urban center that flourished centuries before the traditional Maya era, not just another ceremonial location. The place's immense size challenges our preconceived notions about early Maya civilization and points to a degree of organization and ambition that we only now starting to recognize. These pyramids are some of the biggest ones the Maya ever constructed. The main pyramid complex dominates the landscape as its bulk rises from the jungle floor like an artificial mountain. Massive amounts of stone and dirt had to be moved during construction, and the meticulous organization of this work suggests advanced labor management and planning. The size of the construction suggests a populace with social structures that can manage thousands of workers and a sizable enough population to support such ambitious projects. El Mirador's water management systems exhibit sophisticated engineering skills. They built enormous reservoirs to hold rainwater, which they then directed through well-planned canals to the city's residents. These weren't just pits. They were intricate systems with distribution networks that extended throughout the community, filtration techniques to maintain clean water, and plaster lining to stop seepage. This infrastructure was necessary to sustain a sizable population all year round in an area with seasonal rainfall. The ceremonial centers were spread out throughout the city on a system of elevated causeways. These were designed roads, raised above the jungle floor and paved with limestone plaster, not just paths. They made it easier to move between residential neighborhoods, agricultural zones, and temple complexes. Additionally, the causeways were used for ceremonial purposes, establishing processional routes for events and meetings that brought the city's disparate areas together. El Mirador's construction methods have proven to be exceptionally resilient. They used a plaster made of lime that solidified into a surface impervious to weathering and erosion. Structures have been able to withstand centuries of jungle growth and tropical climates thanks to this material. Careful foundation work and drainage systems. The longevity implies that they constructed with permanence in mind, producing buildings that are meant to endure for many generations. Centuries before the heyday of the classic Maya period, El Mirador was abandoned. The causes are still unknown, but it's possible that social changes, resource depletion, or environmental changes were involved. The fact that subsequent Maya civilizations appeared to have little recollection of this precursor city is especially intriguing. As new centers of power arose elsewhere, it seems that knowledge of its existence and accomplishments was lost, or perhaps purposefully ignored. We are only now starting to comprehend the cycles of civilization suggested by this pattern of rise, flourishing, and abandonment. It casts doubt on the idea of linear progress by demonstrating how cultures can achieve their pinnacles of success before changing or vanishing. The gaps in the archaeological record serve as a reminder of how much information can be lost between cultural periods and how each civilization reconstructs its knowledge based on pieces of its past. Now look at how these builders perceived astronomy and time. The Maya created an incredibly intricate calendar system that tracked several time cycles at once. They kept 3 distinct calendars that worked together like a machine's gears. A long count calendar that measured a great deal of time, a ritual calendar for ceremonial occasions, and a solar calendar for agricultural cycles. They were able to synchronize human activities with celestial events in ways that modern calendars cannot match thanks to this triple system. Compared to our current Gregorian calendar, their solar calendar was more precise. The Maya calculation was accurate because of meticulous observation and mathematical improvement, whereas our system needs leap years and sporadic adjustments to remain in sync with the solar year. Without the use of telescopes or accurate mechanical timepieces, they calculated the solar year to within minutes of contemporary astronomical measurements. Generations of patient observation and documentation were needed to achieve this accuracy. They kept a close eye on Venus, noting when it appeared as a morning and evening star. Their observations gave them a better understanding of Venus patterns than any modern European astronomers, enabling them to forecast its cycles over centuries. They also made remarkably accurate calculations of other planets' movements, lunar cycles, and eclipse patterns. These were methodical notes kept by astronomers and priests with specialized knowledge, not haphazard observations. Their sophisticated knowledge is demonstrated by the detailed astronomical tables found in the Dresden Codex. Calculations for Venus positions, eclipse forecasts, and seasonal indicators are displayed in this surviving manuscript. The table's base 20 numerical system made it possible to perform intricate mathematical operations, such as the introduction of the concept of zero-A mathematical breakthrough that would take centuries for Europe to adopt. Instead of being used for theoretical speculation, the Codex is a working document used for actual astronomical prediction. They synchronized celestial observation and ritual time in their calendar system, ceremonies that matched particular astronomical occurrences, establishing links between cosmic patterns and human behavior. Building layouts mirrored celestial arrangements, doorways framed Venus at its rise, and temple orientations captured sunlight at solstices. A unified worldview where human life reflected cosmic order was produced by the fusion of architecture, astronomy, and ritual. This information needed to be carefully passed down through the generations. The records were kept up to date by specialized scribes and astronomers who trained apprentices in observation and computation techniques. Even as political systems evolved, the knowledge was maintained through codices, stone inscriptions, and oral traditions. The fact that these customs have endured for centuries demonstrates how important precise timekeeping and astronomical observation were to them. The astronomical knowledge of the Maya cities is preserved in stone through architectural alignments. Building orientations indicate celestial north. Window openings frame planetary risings, and pyramid stairways capture equinox shadows. The fact that these stone calendars are still in use centuries after they were made shows how resilient their designs are. Because of their relationship to the shifting sky, the buildings themselves turn into astronomical instruments that track time. What comes out is a body of knowledge that, without the aid of technology, could compete with contemporary understanding. They accomplished what we do with precision instruments through patience, meticulous observation, and mathematical sophistication. Their calendar is an example of a different method of keeping time, one that linked human activity to cosmic patterns rather than treating time as an abstract quantity, and that integrated multiple cycles rather than concentrating only on solar years. Despite its complexity, this astronomical knowledge was extremely useful. It dictated the timing of ceremonies, directed agricultural planting, and influenced political choices. The Maya were aware that weather patterns, ecological cycles, and seasonal variations were all impacted by celestial patterns. Through its useful applications, their calendar benefited the entire society, not just astronomers and priests. We'll now examine how they incorporated this information into their landscape design. Water was much more than just a useful resource to the Maya. It was a direct conduit to the spiritual world. Natural sinkholes known as cenotes served as portals to Xibalba, the underworld where spirits dwelt and cyclical rebirth began. Intentionally, cities grew up around these apertures, incorporating them into the design as ritual sites and sources of water. The sacred cenote became the community's spiritual center as the great city of Chichen Itza centered itself around it. The deep significance these locations held is revealed by underwater explorations. From the depths, divers have found offerings of finely painted pottery, jade jewelry, gold ornaments, and obsidian blades. Human remains discovered in these waters point to burial or sacrifice rituals, which are meant to preserve cosmic equilibrium and connect with ancestor spirits. These were not haphazard deposits. Rather, they were thoughtfully selected objects that symbolized their society's most prized assets. The cenotes were linked to heavenly occurrences through architectural alignments. Directly above a limestone cavern that was submerged, the El Castillo Pyramid at Chichen Itza was built, with its central axis matching the opening of the cenote. Sightlines are created through these portals to the underworld by doorways and platforms positioned to capture particular astronomical phenomena, such as the rising of Venus, the solstice sun, or lunar extremes. At these water-filled openings, the earth, heaven, and underworld converged to form a cosmic map of the physical landscape. These areas were designed by the Maya to have a sensory impact during ceremonies. In order to improve their acoustic qualities, caves and cenotes were shaped or altered, producing echoes that allowed prayers and chants to reverberate through the water and stone. Participants would experience surreal effects as the sound reverberated throughout these chambers. The spiritual experience was enhanced by this auditory component, which made ceremonies more engrossing and life-changing for participants. A sophisticated worldview is represented by this fusion of spiritual practice and practical necessity. Water management systems served ceremonial purposes while also collecting and storing rainfall for community use. During ceremonies, the same reservoirs that supplied drinking water also reflected the sky, forming mirrors between the worlds of the earth and heavens. In addition to being inhabited, the landscape was actively understood as an expression of cosmic order. In contrast to what we might perceive as separation, a culture that saw interconnectedness emerged. The cenotes were living links between worlds rather than merely geological formations. They created vertical axes that allowed spiritual energy to move between dimensions, reflecting the sky above and offering access to the realms below. Every element of their civilization, from daily life to city planning, was influenced by this viewpoint. At these locations, contemporary Maya communities uphold customs by lighting incense and placing flowers at the edges of cenotes. The fact that this practice has persisted for centuries indicates how powerful these locations are in terms of cultural memory. The cenotes continue to serve as portals to deeper levels of comprehension, where the distinction between symbolic meaning and physical reality blurs into one. Now think about how distinct technologies were developed in various regions. What if the Amazon was a landscape that had been meticulously sculpted by humans over thousands of years, rather than a wilderness? Our most profound beliefs about the largest rainforest in the world are called into question by this query. For centuries, we thought that these enormous jungles were unspoiled ecosystems that had not been touched by human activity, with only a few small nomadic tribes coexisting peacefully with the natural world. The story told by modern technology is entirely different. Under the thick canopy, LiDAR surveys now reveal geometric earthworks in the form of squares, circles, and intricate patterns that point to planned settlement as opposed to haphazard occupation. We are forced to re-evaluate what Amazonian civilization looked like. Due to the magnitude of these discoveries, we observe evidence of dense populations residing in well-coordinated communities rather than dispersed tribes. The basin is filled with raised fields that are designed to maximize agricultural productivity while avoiding seasonal flooding. These are complex land management systems that sustain sizable populations rather than straightforward garden plots. The fields are connected to earthen levees, artificial ponds, and drainage canals that regulate water flow throughout the terrain. Terra preta soils are yet another outstanding accomplishment. This nutrient-rich dark earth was purposefully made by humans rather than existing naturally. The soil that remains fertile for centuries was created by combining charcoal, organic waste, and particular microorganisms. Long-term habitation was made possible by this technology in regions where the natural soil would soon run out. Terra preta's formation indicates a profound comprehension of soil chemistry and microbiology that contemporary agriculture is only now starting to recognize. Evidence of urban-scale planning can be found at locations such as Kukugu, straight roads connecting several settlements, ceremonial plazas, and defensive walls all demonstrate a level of social organization that was previously unthinkable for the area. These were permanent hubs built to accommodate sizable populations rather than transient villages. The earthworks' exact geometry points to cosmological significance that goes beyond their utilitarian value. It's possible that the designs represented worldviews in which cosmic patterns were mirrored by human settlement. This environment's engineering demonstrates advanced ecological knowledge. Instead of just occupying the rainforest, they managed it, establishing sustainable systems that allowed people to live there without endangering the ecosystem. Instead of overpowering natural processes, this represents an alternative approach to civilization. The Amazon is transformed by human ingenuity into a civilizational engine rather than a hindrance to progress. It becomes evident that these societies used adaptation and observation to master their They were able to flourish in harsh environments because of their understanding of ecological relationships, soil characteristics, and seasonal patterns. Their knowledge was ingrained in the terrain itself, as evidenced by the layout of settlements, the makeup of soils, and the shape of fields, rather than being recorded in books. The devastating effects of European contact are the reason for the lack of information about these cultures in historical records. These artificial landscapes were abandoned as a result of diseases, social unrest, and population decline. The fields and plazas were gradually reclaimed by the jungle, which covered the evidence with soil and vegetation. We are currently learning about the remains of civilizations that vanished because of forces outside their control, not because they failed. These results reinterpret the Amazon as a place of human accomplishment rather than unspoiled nature. In addition to biological diversity, the forest preserves cultural memory evidence of societies that evolved distinctive responses to environmental challenges. Their legacy serves as a reminder that human ingenuity thrives in a variety of environments, and that civilization can take many different forms. We'll now take a closer look at their agricultural innovations. Through extraordinary engineering and ecological knowledge, the ancient Americans transformed their landscapes into extremely productive agricultural systems. Farmer terraces were carved into steep mountain slopes in the Andes, giving the impression of green stairways leading up to the clouds. Instead of being straightforward flat platforms, these Andeans were meticulously planned microclimates that optimized growth potential at various elevations, while the lower terraces held moisture for plants that prefer water. The upper terraces received more sunlight and warmth, making them perfect for drought-resistant crops like quinoa and some tubers. By using a vertical farming technique, communities were able to grow dozens of crop varieties on a single hillside, guaranteeing food security through diversity as opposed to monoculture. These terrace systems served as intricate networks for water management. Rainfall was directed from higher elevations to lower terraces via stone-lined channels, which ensured even water distribution and prevented erosion. By capturing nutrient-rich sediment that would otherwise wash downhill, the terraces themselves served as organic filters. Because of the sustainable growing conditions that were established by this preservation of soil and water, many old terraces are still fruitful today, with their original stonework still present and in working order. Terra preta, a dark earth whose fertility appears to rise rather than fall with time, was created by farmers in the Amazon basin. This artificial soil creates a self-renewing growing medium by combining organic waste, charcoal, pottery fragments, and particular microorganisms, while the microbial communities continue to break down organic matter to release nutrients for plants. The charcoal maintains nutrients and gives structure. This technology is difficult for modern scientists to fully replicate, indicating that these ancient farmers had a deeper understanding of soil ecology than we do today. Chinampas floating gardens were constructed by the Aztecs using woven reed mats that were secured to shallow lake beds. Nutrient-rich mud from the lake bottom was layered over these man-made islands to create extremely productive plots that could be harvested several times a year. The system's fertility was enhanced by the irrigation, produced transportation, and aquatic life that the canals between the gardens supported, without requiring significant land clearance. This integrated approach produced enough food to sustain Tenochtitlan's sizable urban population. These agricultural systems give rise to a pattern of cooperating with ecological processes instead of opposing them. The Amazonian farmers learned soil microbiology, the Chinampa engineers used aquatic ecosystems, and the terrace builders comprehended water flow and microclimates. In response to local conditions, they created thousands of crop varieties, many of which are still vital sources of food today. Their farming practices sustained dense populations while preserving the health of the environment, a balance that contemporary agriculture still finds difficult to attain. agricultural systems in the Americas were frequently more productive and sustainable than those in Europe when they first arrived. Compared to European field systems, the terraces were able to produce more food from difficult terrain than they could from fertile plains. The yields produced by the Chinampas were greater than those of any farming technique used in Europe at the time. Civilizations that rivaled European societies in size and complexity, but took entirely different technological routes, were sustained by this agricultural sophistication. Modern sustainable agriculture is still influenced by these traditional methods. Today's urban agriculturalists look to Chinampas for inspiration in limited space farming. Researchers examined terra preta for carbon sequestration potential, and farmers researched terrace systems for erosion control. The information reflects an alternative method of producing food that prioritizes sustainability over yield in the short term and operates within ecological constraints rather than attempting to circumvent them solely through technological means. Let's now turn our attention to another great civilization in the north. As the biggest earthen construction north of Mexico, Monk's Mound rises out of the Illinois landscape as evidence of the advanced civilization that once flourished here. At its height, Cahokia, which is close to present-day St. Louis, was a significant urban center that could accommodate tens of thousands of people. This was not just a collection of villages. Rather, it was a meticulously designed city with separate residential neighborhoods, places of worship, and commercial districts arranged around a central plaza. Long-held beliefs that North America was sparsely populated prior to European contact are challenged by the extent of occupation, which instead shows a continent dotted with complex societies. Amazing coordination can be seen in the social structure needed to support such a population. Craft experts created tools, ceramics, and ritual items, and neighborhoods of homes made of wood, clay, and thatch surrounded the ceremonial center. Strong social cohesiveness and common cultural customs were demonstrated by the thousands of people who could attend community events held in the central plaza. Political structures that can handle resources, settle disputes, and plan major projects are suggested by this level of organization. The solar and lunar calendar was a circular system of enormous wooden posts that precisely tracked the motions of the stars. This woodhenge guided agricultural cycles and ceremonial timing by aligning with sunrise and sunset points throughout the year. This structure as astronomical knowledge demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of celestial patterns that are incorporated into ritual practice and daily life. By linking communal activities to cosmic rhythms, the woodhenge functioned as a living calendar. Through exchange relationships, trade networks linked the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico, extending Cahokia's influence over great distances. Copper from Lake Superior, seashells from the Atlantic coast, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains all made their way to the city, suggesting a wide range of cultural exchange. The development of Cahokia was influenced by ideas, technologies, and cultural influences that were made possible by these exchange networks, in addition to tangible goods. The city was the focal point of a network of connections spanning the entire continent. Advanced water management systems that regulated drainage and avoided flooding in the community were among the engineering feats, with Monk's Mound alone requiring the movement of millions of baskets of soil. The enormous earthworks required meticulous planning and construction. Because of their knowledge of soil composition, compaction methods, and structural stability, the builders were able to construct mounds that have stood the test of time. Coordinated labor efforts were necessary for these projects, demonstrating social organization that can mobilize and maintain sizable workforces. The city's decline which took place centuries before European contact and lacked concrete proof of invasion or conflict, is still a mystery. Its abandonment could have been caused by social changes, environmental pressures, or climate changes. Many questions concerning the reasons behind the eventual emptying of this thriving center remain unanswered due to the dearth of written records. It is still evident that the customs and knowledge created here had an impact on later cultures throughout the area, creating a legacy that endured long after the city itself was abandoned. This metropolis serves as evidence that advanced societies thrived throughout North America, creating original responses to environmental problems. Despite not pursuing the same technological trajectories as European or Mesoamerican cultures, they produced sophisticated societies and attained similar degrees of cultural accomplishment and social organization. The data compels us to reevaluate narratives that undervalued indigenous achievements and failed to account for the size of pre-contact societies. We'll now look at how they used the landscape to encode knowledge. What if entire landscapes functioned as spiritual maps and cosmic calendars, in addition to being places to live? Ancient peoples in the Midwest constructed earthworks in the shapes of birds, turtles, bears, snakes, and other animals to correspond with astronomical events. A different method of knowledge recording is represented by these effigy mounds, which preserved astronomical and cultural knowledge by using the land itself as a medium. They encoded their knowledge of the cosmos into the Earth's very shape. Since they lacked a written language, using only wooden and bone tools, the construction process involved the careful layering of soil, clay, and stone. Each animal form had a distinct symbolic meaning. For example, birds stood for the realm of the sky, four-legged creatures for the earthly plane, and serpents for the underworld. These were well thought-out depictions of a cosmic vision rather than haphazard shapes. Over 1,000 feet in length, the Ohio Serpent Mound's curves correspond to the sunrise and sunset times of the year. Other mounds monitor specific astronomical events, such as comet appearances and even lunar cycles. Ritual knowledge became physically ingrained in the landscape, transforming it into a living memory palace. Communities congregated on the mounds for observances and festivities related to astronomical cycles. They served as a calendar and a cathedral, bridging the gap between religious practice and agricultural timing. By establishing multisensory connections between the human body, the shaped earth, and the moving sky, the act of walking these shaped landscapes would have reinforced cultural knowledge through physical experience. Numerous of these earthworks had neither human remains nor burial items, indicating that their main function was symbolic rather than funerary, invoking the abilities of the animals they portrayed and preserving harmony between the human, animal, and cosmic domains. There were spiritual messages etched into the landscape. The expertise needed to produce these alignments shows that advanced astronomical observation was sustained over many generations without the use of written documentation. These landscape calendars are no longer in existence because of the tragic destruction of innumerable effigy mounds caused by modern agriculture and development. Only a small portion of the original network of earthworks that once covered the area is represented by what is left. Researchers who examine how the remaining mounds relate to astronomical occurrences continue to discover their alignments, demonstrating accuracy that casts doubt on presumptions regarding the builder's technological prowess. The effigy mounds are an example of an alternative technological approach that preserved complex information by altering the landscape as opposed to using writing systems. This method preserved a natural environment while producing long-lasting records that have withstood centuries of exposure. The relationship between the shaped earth and the moving sky was the source of the knowledge, which required active interpretation and maintenance rather than being preserved in books or tablets. Through meticulous observation and collective memory, a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and spatial relationships is revealed. The builders were sufficiently knowledgeable about solar and lunar cycles to produce long-lasting markers that would be precise for many generations to come. They blended spiritual ideas that linked human societies to larger cosmic patterns with the useful knowledge of surveying and building. These landscape calendars show how science, religion, and the arts came together to form the Earth in a harmonious way. They show that technological sophistication is not limited to the mechanical innovations that are usually associated with highly developed civilizations. The ability of humans to encode complex information in a variety of media using the most resilient materials found on Earth is demonstrated by the effigy mounds. Now think about how distinct technologies were developed in various regions. The ancestral Pueblones constructed buildings that served as accurate astronomical instruments in the high desert of the American Southwest. Architecture became a living calendar when the great houses of Chaco Canyon were meticulously synchronized with the cycles of the sun and moon. By capturing sunlight at precise times, windows, doorways, and hallways were able to accurately mark the solstices and equinoxes. Through intentional design, the buildings became tangible representations of celestial knowledge, relating everyday existence to cosmic patterns. One of their most advanced inventions is the sun dagger. A spiral carved into the rock is framed by 3 vertical stone slabs, forming a natural observatory. A slender beam of light shines straight through the middle of the spiral at noon on the summer solstice. The spiral's edges are framed by twin daggers of light on the winter solstice. The light is seen perfectly kissing the rim of the spiral on the spring and fall equinoxes. Their profound comprehension of three-dimensional space and celestial mechanics is demonstrated by this exact interplay of light and shadow. Kivas had specially designed acoustic qualities and were used as ceremonial chambers. These round underground areas improved sound during ceremonies and storytelling, giving participants a more engaging experience. By promoting spiritual ties and the sharing of knowledge, the acoustics enhanced the ceremony's transformative power. These areas served as both ritual sites and technological marvels that enhanced the ceremonial impact through the use of sound. Road systems, which frequently ignored the natural terrain, connected locations over great distances in an unnerving straight line. These were ceremonial routes that created symbolic axes across the landscape, not just trade routes. The roads, which showed advanced engineering and social organization, linked holy locations in a network of spiritual geography. The significance of ceremonial ties between communities is reflected in the considerable planning and labor coordination needed for their construction. Water management systems demonstrate how creatively they can adjust to arid environments. To retain moisture, they constructed reservoirs, terrace farms surrounded by rock walls, and rainwater harvesting. Under difficult environmental circumstances, these systems enabled the production of corn, beans, and squash. The population density required to maintain intricate social structures and build monumental architecture was made possible by the success of these agricultural techniques. Their architecture demonstrates a thorough comprehension of environmental patterns and seasonal cycles. Structures were arranged to offer shade in the summer and optimize solar heating in the winter. For year-round use, water collection systems collected seasonal rainfall, a holistic approach to design where each element served multiple purposes. is demonstrated by the integration of ceremonial functions with practical needs. Instead of written records, knowledge was transmitted orally and through ritual. The acoustically improved kivas served as venues for the exchange of cultural values, agricultural timing, and astronomical knowledge. Without a written language, this oral tradition made sure that complex information was preserved for generations to come. The effectiveness of these methods of knowledge transmission is demonstrated by the persistence of practices and architectural styles over centuries. A complex social structure was reflected in the great houses, which functioned as both residential and ceremonial centers. These structures' size and exact astronomical alignments imply that some members of the community possess specialized knowledge. Daily life and ceremonial practice were combined to create a society in which practical knowledge and spirituality were closely entwined. A civilization that attained sophistication in a manner distinct from that of European cultures is what emerges. Without creating written language or metal tools, their astronomical knowledge was on par with that of modern-day Europe. Instead of using mechanical inventions, their architectural accomplishments showcase sophisticated mathematical and engineering skills expressed through stone and earth. This is an alternative route to complexity that prioritized balance with natural cycles over dominance of the environment. Through careful observation and adaptation, the ancestral Pueblones established a thriving civilization. Their accomplishments in environmental management, architecture, and astronomy demonstrate a deep comprehension of their surroundings. Their technical and intellectual achievements are demonstrated by the accuracy of their heavenly alignments and the robustness of their constructions. We'll now investigate their abrupt disappearance. Why did major cities in the Americas disappear so long before Europeans arrived? From the Andes Mountains to the Mississippi Valley, this question lingers in the quiet ruins. Urban centers in several civilizations gradually emptied as populations scattered or changed, causing them to decline quickly. The pattern is consistent across time and space, indicating shared difficulties that even highly developed societies are unable to permanently overcome. A major contributing factor to these abandonments was frequently climate change. In areas that had once supported dense populations, prolonged droughts that lasted decades or even centuries rendered agriculture unsustainable. According to tree ring research, the decline of Maya city-states and ancestral Puebloan settlements corresponded with periods of unusual dryness. Communities were forced to relocate or adapt as a result of the disruption of water management systems that had been in place for generations due to changing rainfall patterns. These environmental stresses were exacerbated by resource depletion. Despite advanced terracing and fertilization techniques, centuries of intensive agriculture occasionally depleted soils. Local microclimates were changed and resources were diminished as a result of deforestation for fuel and building. Overfishing and overhunting have occasionally diminished protein supplies that are essential for sustaining urban populations. These were gradual processes that built up over many generations until the systems broke. Complex societies fell apart as a result of social and political factors. During protracted crises, complex ceremonial systems that had preserved social cohesiveness occasionally lost their power. Conflict within social hierarchies or between communities may result from competition for limited resources. These civilizations may have been more susceptible to collapse when systems failed, because of the very complexity that made them successful. Migration was frequently not a sign of collapse, but rather a logical reaction. Communities occasionally relocated on purpose to areas with better resources or more advantageous circumstances. From an archaeological point of view, this population dispersal might seem like abandonment, but in reality, it symbolized adaptation and change. These migrant groups carried knowledge and customs with them, impacting new areas and cultures. These civilizations' knowledge was not so much lost as it was changed. Subsequent cultures frequently expanded on past accomplishments, modifying them to fit novel situations and settings. The Inca adopted methods from earlier Andean cultures. The Maya adopted ideas from the Olmec, and several North American societies carried on the mound-building customs. This is an ongoing process of cultural evolution rather than a radical change. Instead of linear progress, a pattern of cyclical development is revealed. Civilizations arose, thrived for centuries, and then changed as circumstances evolved. Occasionally, the same areas saw several urbanization cycles, interspersed with times of dispersal or less complex social structure. This cyclical pattern implies that complexity is a stage in longer cultural trajectories, rather than necessarily an endpoint. These highly developed societies' susceptibility serves as a reminder that no civilization lasts forever. Social dynamics, resource constraints, and environmental changes create difficulties that call for constant adaptation. The deserted cities serve as a reminder of human society's dynamic nature rather than their failure. Instead of sticking to unsustainable patterns, they changed, adapted, and occasionally moved on. This viewpoint alters our understanding of civilization in general. We might consider abandonment to be transformation rather than collapse. Even when certain urban centers emptied, the people, knowledge, and traditions remained. In various forms, the legacy persisted and impacted later cultures throughout the Americas. Now think about what Europeans found when they arrived in these altered environments. Without the instruments that Europeans deemed necessary, how were intricate metalworking techniques accomplished by ancient American metal? Advanced techniques that took a totally different technological path were developed by Andean cultures, using techniques that continued to captivate contemporary researchers. They worked with gold, silver, copper, and other alloys to create objects of extraordinary beauty and complexity. Instead of developing more powerful tools, their approach to metallurgy focused on producing particular symbolic and visual effects for ceremonial and spiritual uses. They created tumbaga, copper, and gold alloy with special qualities. They could dissolve the copper from the surface layer and leave behind a rich golden appearance by applying organic acids made from plant sources. This method demonstrated both chemical knowledge and economic practicality by producing items that looked like solid gold, while using less of the precious metal. By using natural processes instead of electrical current, the technique exemplifies an early type of electroplating. There were many difficulties in reaching the temperatures required for working metals. They produced constant high heat by using the natural wind patterns in mountain passes rather than bellows or sophisticated furnace technology. They established their smelting facilities in areas where strong winds could naturally feed the fires, causing them to reach temperatures of over 900 degrees Celsius. They were able to work with materials that needed extreme heat, such as arsenic, bronze alloys, thanks to environmental engineering. Their metal creations had more ceremonial than utilitarian purposes. In addition to demonstrating technical mastery, elaborate masks, ceremonial trumpets, and symbolic ornaments satisfied spiritual needs. With carefully shaped tubes and internal diameters that produced particular musical tones, metal trumpets discovered at different locations exhibit precise acoustic properties. They demonstrated an awareness of sound wave principles because they were ceremonial instruments rather than ornamental items. Instead of emphasizing structural strength, their metalworking prioritized aesthetics and symbolic meaning. They covered the walls of stone temples with metal foils, so thin they were almost transparent. Whole structures seemed to glow as waves of illumination were produced by the reflected light from sunlight striking these surfaces. This use of metal to manipulate light demonstrates a different focus than making tools or weapons. Instead, they were designing spiritual experiences rather than useful things. Their meticulousness demonstrates a deep comprehension of materials and procedures. They became proficient in methods such as hammerwork, lost wax casting, and fine soldering without the use of magnifying glasses or exact measuring devices. They produced items with hidden hinges, moving parts, and intricate filigree work that would be difficult for contemporary artisans to complete, even with the most sophisticated equipment. This technical accomplishment is the result of generations of specialized training and accumulated knowledge. Compared to Old World metallurgy, this method represents a distinct technological trajectory. Andean metallurgy evolved along aesthetic and spiritual lines, while European metalworking concentrated more on producing more potent weapons and effective tools. They placed greater value on the symbolic qualities of metals such as their color, reflectivity, and acoustics than on their usefulness in agriculture or combat. The result is a kind of spiritual engineering in which metal was used to serve the soul instead of the hand. Generations of skilled artisans operating in ceremonial settings preserved and passed on the knowledge needed to make these items. Their accomplishments show that technological sophistication is not limited to the route that results in mechanical advantage or industrial production. Instead of using metal to manipulate physical environments, they developed a metallurgy of devotion rather than dominance. The outstanding technical accomplishments that resulted from this alternative priority system continued to astonish and inspire admiration for their creativity and talent. We'll then look at the timeless myths that arose from these societies. What if there was more to the El Dorado myth than meets the eye? Inspired by stories of unfathomable wealth, European explorers searched for centuries for visions of cities paved with gold throughout the Americas. These tales began as authentic indigenous ceremonies, but were warped by colonial ambition and cultural misinterpretation. Their expectations were not met by the reality they found, but instead of realizing what was in front of them, they kept looking for tangible treasure. The most obvious illustration of this misunderstanding is the ceremony held at Lake Guatavita. Offering treasures to the water spirits, indigenous leaders clad in gold dust would paddle to the center of the hallowed lake. This ceremony had deep spiritual significance regarding sacrifice, harmony, and a relationship with nature. The ceremony's deeper meaning regarding humanity's relationship with nature was not visible to European observers, who only saw its glittering exterior. These civilizations' real wealth was ecological rather than metallic. Their advanced knowledge of forest ecology, water management, and sustainable agriculture allowed them to support complex societies without destroying their natural resources. By using methods like advanced agroforestry systems and terra preta soil enhancement, they produced fruitful landscapes. Instead of using exploitation and dominance, this knowledge enabled civilizations to thrive for centuries in balance with their environment. Europeans were unable to identify the forms of the forest cities they sought. Rather than stone palaces and golden towers, they found communities woven into the living forest, with buildings constructed from cultivated vines, groves that were tended as organic architecture, and irrigation systems that served as both utilitarian infrastructure and ceremonial routes. In these cities, the lines between nature and culture were blurred by spiritual understanding and careful management. By concentrating only on material wealth, European conquest narratives methodically hid these accomplishments. They were unable to comprehend the advanced societies they came across. Because of their obsession with finding gold, they collected golden artifacts while disregarding ecological knowledge, recorded temple treasures but not hydrological engineering, and documented precious metals while ignoring agricultural systems. It took centuries to rectify the skewed historical record caused by this selective perception. The ability to live sustainably in a variety of ecosystems was the true El Dorado. It was the hydrological engineering that controlled water throughout the seasons, the knowledge of soil microbiology that established permanent fertility, and the agroforestry systems that maintained biodiversity while producing food. The ability to sustain human civilization indefinitely without causing environmental degradation was represented by this knowledge, which was true wealth. It becomes evident that the most valuable resources were overlooked by the Europeans due to their obsession with precious metals. They ignored what could sustain life for generations in favor of what could be weighed and melted. Their cultural framework prioritized short-term wealth over long-term stability and accumulation over sustainability. Because of these disparities in values, they were oblivious to the true accomplishments of the civilizations they came across. Although the myth of El Dorado still influences our thoughts, anthropological and archaeological studies have restored its actual significance. We now realize that the true gem was the advanced ecological knowledge that had been accumulated over thousands of years. This knowledge is a form of wealth that is based on harmony rather than dominance, on understanding rather than possession. Now think about how these societies perceived their position in the universe. Why would anyone make enormous drawings that could only be seen from above? With geometric accuracy and enormous animal shapes that are impossible to see from the ground, the Nazca Lines stretch across the high desert of Peru. A distinct form of communication, one that required specific knowledge to create and specific perspectives to understand, is represented by this collection of straight lines, spirals, and animal figures. These designs have been preserved for centuries in the arid climate thanks to the Nazca people's method of removing dark surface gravel to reveal lighter soil underneath. Many theories have been proposed to explain their function, but their purpose is still unknown. According to some researchers, they functioned as ceremonial routes for ceremonies held in the arid season. According to some, they served as celestial calendars, with particular alignments signifying equinoxes, solstices, or particular star positions. The straight lines might have denoted pilgrimage routes between holy locations, while the animal figures might have symbolized ceremonial totems associated with water spirits or agricultural cycles. It becomes evident that their design is integrated. Certain geoglyphs correspond to subterranean water sources, linking ritual practice to real-world survival in this arid setting. Others indicate positions for sunrise or sunset at significant seasonal changes. This points to a worldview in which spirituality, agriculture, and astronomy were all closely related fields of study rather than distinct fields. The lines might have functioned as a symbolic map, showing the full convergence of practical needs and belief systems. Social organization and advanced surveying methods were necessary for the creation process. The Nazca people produced remarkably accurate designs that span hundreds of feet, using basic tools and careful proportioning, without the use of contemporary measuring tools. They devised techniques for producing flawless geometric shapes and keeping straight lines over miles of terrain. This accuracy points to specialized knowledge that has been passed down through generations of artisans who have a solid understanding of geometry and spatial relationships. These lines, which offer a singular window into Nazca culture, have been preserved for centuries by the arid climate. The sharp contrast between the lighter exposed soil and the dark surface gravel has been preserved by erosion and a lack of rainfall. Although many questions about their complete significance within Nazcan society remain, this preservation enables us to examine their methods and think about their meanings. They offer an alternative method of altering the landscape that combines survival, astronomy, and art into one field. In a culture where spiritual practice and practical knowledge were intertwined, the straight lines delineated ritual pathways and the animal figures functioned as ceremonial totems. The lines might have served as a tangible representation of their knowledge of the cosmos, projecting patterns from the heavens onto the surface of the earth. Significant social organization and a common goal are indicated by the size of these creations. Long periods of communal investment and concerted effort were needed to create geoglyphs that stretched for miles. This points to a society that valued spiritual expression as vital to the well-being of the community, and was able to organize labor for projects that had ceremonial rather than purely utilitarian purposes. The result is a civilization that used the landscape itself as a medium for communication, crafting messages with many levels of meaning. The lines served as a cathedral, a calendar, and a piece of public art all at once. They show that technological sophistication can extend beyond practical innovations, accepting spirituality and symbolic expression as equally significant facets of human accomplishment. Let us now examine what we might learn about civilizations that have been lost to rising waters from submerged sites. What if whole societies are hidden beneath the waves, their histories preserved in the quiet depths? Our knowledge of ancient American history may be altered by the submerged coastal settlements caused by rising sea levels over millennia. These underwater locations are the newest frontier in archaeology, where findings contradict preconceived notions and point to human existence considerably earlier than is permitted by traditional models. These submerged landscapes provide evidence of advanced societies that eventually became a part of the waters after adapting to shifting coastlines. Architectural features that extend the known reach of Maya civilization can be found in underwater cave systems. Off the Yucatan Peninsula, these submerged chambers have intact stone walls, stairways, and ceremonial platforms, indicating intentional construction as opposed to unintentional flooding. The Maya incorporated these watery areas into their conception of the cosmos, seeing them as portals to the underworld rather than barriers to progress. They have a different relationship with water than most contemporary societies do, as evidenced by their willingness to construct in these difficult environments. Submerged stone formations in Lake Titicaca point to settlements that existed before the Tiwanaku culture. Significant geological changes over centuries are indicated by the depths at which walls, foundations, and ceremonial courtyards rest. How ancient peoples adjusted to changing shorelines and rising water levels is a question these underwater ruins raise. Because these sites are preserved, there are exceptional chances to research building methods and everyday life without the disruptions that come with land-based archaeological sites. At depths greater than 600 meters, geometric patterns found on the Caribbean seabed indicate human modification. Far below current sea levels, sonar imagery shows structures that resemble roads, pyramids, and potential urban grids. These formations provide evidence of coastal networks that connected areas that are currently divided by open water at a time when sea levels were significantly lower. These possible settlement size indicates that their inhabitants are capable of considerable long-distance trade and maritime engineering. With its half-kilometer stretch of rectangular stones placed seemingly purposefully, the Bimini Road is a particular mystery. The regularity of the blocks and their alignment point to potential human involvement, even though some geologists believe the formation was the result of natural processes. The controversy surrounding this site serves as an example of the difficulties in underwater archaeology, where the evidence is frequently ambiguous and subject to different interpretations. These buried communities have been both preserved and hidden by climate change. These landscapes were shielded from erosion and human disturbance that affect terrestrial sites by the same rising waters that claimed them. Compared to their terrestrial counterparts, the anaerobic conditions in deep water preserve organic materials that would have decomposed on land, potentially providing richer archaeological contexts. These underwater finds point to a more extensive coastal civilization network than was previously thought. The capacity to establish long-term communities in coastal areas is a sign of advanced knowledge of marine environments and adaptation techniques. Because of their submersion, these communities would have created distinctive technologies for coastal agriculture, fishing, and water transportation that are still little understood. Throughout these cultures, water functioned as a spiritual axis and memory preserver. Their legacy was safeguarded by the same element that claimed their settlements, producing time capsules that are only now being accessed by modern technology. Water's dual function as a destroyer and a preserver illustrates the intricate relationship that prehistoric Americans had with their. Lastly, when we look at these lost civilizations, let's reevaluate what progress actually means. What if there are other indicators of progress besides technological complexity? Western historical narratives frequently associate advancement with writing systems and metal tools, resulting in a framework that ignores civilizations that evolved in different ways. This viewpoint ignores other types of sophistication that might be just as valuable while elevating some technological accomplishments. This limited definition of progress is called into question by evidence from ancient American civilizations, which show societies that accomplished amazing feats using different methods. Modern science is just now starting to rediscover the ecological knowledge that these cultures developed. Terra preta, a self-renewing agricultural soil that stays fertile for centuries, was produced by their knowledge of soil microbiology. They used advanced engineering to manage water resources, sustaining sizable populations in harsh conditions. Their agroforestry systems produced food, medicine, and building materials while fostering biodiversity. Modern industrial agriculture is still striving to replicate this ecological wisdom without the use of sophisticated machinery or metal tools. Their architecture exhibits a profound understanding of materials and physics. The Tiwanaku precision stonework exhibits joints that fit precisely without mortar, withstanding centuries of seismic activity. The Maya temple's astronomical alignments demonstrate highly developed mathematical and observational abilities. Modern builders continue to study the intuitive engineering of the earthquake-resistant structures at Caral. Knowledge passed down through the generations rather than recorded in written forms was necessary for these accomplishments. Coordinated action was made possible by social organization rather than centralized authority or apparent coercion. Large-scale community collaboration was needed to build the intricate irrigation systems in the Andes and the enormous earthworks at Cahokia. The survival of transcontinental trade networks points to social structures that can coexist peacefully with people from different cultural backgrounds. Rather than using top-down authority, These societies attained complexity through consensus and a common goal. They were able to sustain societies for longer than many contemporary civilizations. Some locations have been occupied continuously for millennia without showing signs of environmental deterioration. Their water management systems worked flawlessly for centuries, and their agricultural methods enhanced soils rather than diminished them. This longevity points to a different, balanced, rather than dominating relationship with nature. Instead of written records, their knowledge was preserved through oral traditions, ritual practices, and landscape features. While the Nazca Lines preserved ceremonial pathways across the desert, the effigy mounds encoded astronomical information in their alignments. Complex agricultural calendars and ecological knowledge were passed down through the generations orally. This is an example of an alternative method of information preservation that prioritized useful application over purely abstract documentation. Instead of dominating nature, a new definition of progress that incorporates harmony with it emerges. These societies created lifestyles that supported human populations and their surroundings for extended periods of time. Their accomplishments make us reevaluate whether technological sophistication inevitably results in better societies, or whether other metrics of success may have greater long-term significance. This viewpoint alters our understanding of human accomplishment. It implies that there are numerous ways to achieve sophistication, and that the course taken by Western civilizations is merely one of many options as we confront contemporary environmental issues. The enduring legacy of these ancient American cultures provides alternative models for how people might coexist peacefully with their environment. We are just now starting to uncover the secrets that the stones of Tiwanaku continue to whisper. These societies serve as a reminder that knowledge is not limited to written records. Think about the lost knowledge that may be contained in ancient ruins the next time you visit them. We are just now starting to uncover the secrets that the stones of Tiwanaku continue to whisper. These ancient societies show that knowledge is not limited to written documents and well-known technologies. Their accomplishments in sustainable living, agriculture, and astronomy point to alternate routes to sophistication that contemporary society is still coming to understand. Harmonious coexistence with their surroundings, rather than technological dominance, is the real indicator of their progress. The next time you come across ancient ruins, think about the lessons they may have imparted about coexisting peacefully with the environment. Their legacy challenges us to reconsider what real progress looks like.